Hey everybody, it's Mike from the Mike Wagner Show, powered by SoundCloud Studios, brought to you by official sponsor of the Mike Wagner Show, international warring author Mia Molson's The Missing, available on Amazon, paperback and ebook. Coming soon, Missing 2, Double Suspense, Double of Fun. Check it out on Amazon. Also brought to you by a sweet psalmist by Serena Wagner, based on the life of David, including 30 exquisite paintings in King David Psalms. Amazon.com, keyword Sweet Psalmist Serena Wagner. Check out the Mike Wagner Show at the MikeWagnerShow.com, 50 podcast platforms, 110 countries. Check us out on Facebook, SoundCloud, Spreaker, Spotify, iHeartRadio, BitChute, Rumble, YouTube, Apple Music, Spreaker, and more. We're here with a terrific gentleman who's an author with degrees in applied mathematics, aerospace engineering, and computerized computational neuroscience. And he's also a sought-after speaker and a former tenured professor turned entrepreneur. We'll talk about that. He's the chief scientist of Aleria, president of ARC, and also adjunct at New York Stern School of Business. And also, he's also part of the annual Diversity and Inclusion Research Conference. We'll talk about that. He explains DEI in easy to understand concept by creating a happier employees, making more manageable. And the book is called Measuring Inclusion. We'll talk about that. Live, ladies and gentlemen, plus dudes in beautiful downtown New York City, the amazing author of degrees in applied math, aerospace engineering, and computational neuroscience. Software speaker with the book Measuring Inclusion, the multi-talented Paolo Gaudiano. Paolo, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, Mike. It's a real pleasure meeting you, and it's quite an honor to be here. Thank you so much.
Well, it's great to have you on board, Paolo. You're an author of degrees in applied mathematics, aerospace engineering, computational neuroscience. You're a sought-after speaker. You're also a former tenured professor, land entrepreneur. You're a chief scientist at Aleria, president of ARC, and adjunct at New York's School of Business, and chairman of the annual Diversity and Inclusion Research Conference. You also explain DEI in easy to understand format, and the book is called Measuring Inclusion. For getting on, Paolo, tell us how I first got started.
Well, I got started in a bit of an odd way, which is that I always joke with people when I talk about my work in diversity and inclusion. I describe myself as the white elephant in the room because it's not that common for people like me. I'm white, male, cisgender, heterosexual. I don't have any permanent disabilities. And so I often, people often ask, what are you doing in working in the space of diversity and inclusion? I came into the space officially as a profession about 10 years ago. Sorry, when I saw an opportunity to apply work that I've been doing first in academia and then as an entrepreneur and consultant. I thought I could apply that to try to understand whether it's possible to show a company how much money they may be able to make by actually treating their employees better. And I felt that a lot of the work that was being done at the time in diversity, equity, and inclusion was motivated more about issues of fairness and justice. But I felt that ultimately, if you want to consider a business leader, if you want to consider, tell a business leader and convince them that they should embrace some of these ideas, you have to use arguments that make sense to them. And if you're a business leader, the one thing that really makes the most sense for you is how do I make more money? And part of that is how do I make sure that my employees are fully engaged and fully productive? And that's really the angle that I came into it. And that was 10 years ago. And since then, as you mentioned, I've been working with I created a startup called Aleria, where we have developed software that actually helps companies to measure inclusion, and I can tell you more later about what that's all about. The book that I wrote last year called Measuring Inclusion essentially describes the methodology, but more importantly, it talks about this idea that there is a lot of misunderstanding about diversity, equity, and inclusion, and there is a way of actually embracing that without creating backlash, without upsetting white people, and in a way that actually directly links to the well-being of companies. So that's my story.
Mm-hmm. And how would you describe the myths of the DEI? It's like, what are some of the myths that you would debunk?
Well, I think that the diversity, equity, inclusion has been turned into this political hot potato, especially right now, which I think is very unfortunate because what I'm hearing is that people from, if you want to think of it as both sides, right? There are the people that really think that DI is a terrible thing and the people that think that DI is a wonderful thing. I honestly hear a lot of mistaken arguments from both sides. And let me start by the mistakes that I see on the pro DEI side. My biggest concern, and I wrote about this actually as early as 2018, so 7 years ago, I wrote an article in Forbes in which I said, if we continue to focus on diversity alone as the target of our initiatives and as the measurements that we use, it's going to lead to backlash. And I quite literally said it's going to get white men to complain about reverse discrimination and it's going to spread to other parts of society. And lo and behold, that's exactly what happened. And the problem is that diversity in and of itself, I'd like to use an analogy. If you walk into your house in the winter and it feels really cold, you look at the thermostat, it reads 50 degrees Fahrenheit. I know how to fix it. I light a match under the thermostat. And look, now it reads 70, 80, 90 degrees. But meanwhile, the windows are open and the front door is drafty, the roof is leaking, and I may actually burn the house down. And that's exactly what happened. The diversity of a company is a snapshot in time. It's like your balance sheet of how your people are inside the organization, and it reflects everything that happens. The fact that your diversity may not be as good as you would like it to be is not really the issue. It's the outcome. It's the result of the fact that there are some groups of people in your organization that are treated better or worse than other groups. One outcome of that is that the people that are not treated as well are going to be likely to leave, which means that you're going to have fewer of them, so you have less diversity. But just hiring more of those people is a big mistake because it means that you're potentially bringing people into an environment when they're not welcome. So instead, my argument, which then when I go to the other side of the fence, when I talk to business leaders, I say, look, don't think about DI as corporate social responsibility or an act of charity. Here's the way that you can think about it. If you have, let's say, two groups of people, let's say that you have men and women in your company. And let's say that women, for whatever reason, you're creating an environment where they're less welcome than men. They're less able to perform their work. So what happens? They're less satisfied, which means that they will produce less. And we know it's a very well documented fact that satisfaction is linked to your productivity and the quality of your work. So you're immediately losing money because a group of your people, in this case women, are producing less than they could if they were treated the same way as men. But secondly, these women are much more likely to leave. And we know that that's also true, that people that are less satisfied, they will leave. And we know that replacing employees is a very, very costly, disruptive, time-consuming process. So if you have a condition in your company in which some of your employees, whether because of their gender or because of their sexual orientation or because of their ethnicity, whatever the case might be, if they're treated less well, if they have different experiences, that have nothing to do with your skills, that have only to do with their identity, you're shooting yourself in the foot because you're losing money through lower productivity and lower retention rates, which
Mhm,
also manifest themselves as diversity. So
mhm.
you see, the point is, I'm trying to bring everybody together, say, look, we all want the same thing. We all want to be able to get a job for which we're qualified, regardless of what we look like. And if we're working in that company and we're doing well, we want to be able to succeed and get compensated properly and get promoted and do all these other wonderful things. That's what everybody wants. But then we get tied up in these arguments about diversity and meritocracy and fairness and justice and reverse discrimination. And we confuse things in a way that is completely unnecessary. And my book and my work really makes it blindingly clear that we really all want the same thing. And we just have to come up with the right metrics, the right definitions, and a way of linking the behaviors and experiences of the people to the ROI of the company. And that's essentially what I do.
You mentioned something about was it meritocracy? What is that?
Meritocracy. So meritocracy, it's a very interesting term because people today in business talk about meritocracy as sort of an idealistic situation in which people advance in an organization because of their merit, because of their performance, not because they're black or because they're women or because of disability or because they're white or whatever the case might be. Now, what's interesting is that so the idea is that a meritocracy means, it's basically a hierarchical system in which people advance based on their merit. The problem is that as much as people tout meritocracy as being a wonderful thing, and they say, oh, diversity, equity, inclusion destroys meritocracies because now we got to hire these people that are less qualified, which is a whole different argument that is also very deeply flawed. But even if it was true, the problem is unless you define what a meritocracy actually is, and you quantify it and you show me that it actually makes your business work better, then it's just an ideology. And so right now what's happening today is that we have these people that are talking about this ideology of meritocracy. And by the way, any listener that has ever said, I think meritocracy is great, I would challenge you to the following. Find me one company, one, where somebody has actually taken the time to define meritocracy in a way that is clear and measurable, and that they've actually measured the impact of meritocracy over time and shown that their definition of meritocracy actually leads to greater results. If you can find one company that has ever done that, please let me know because I've never seen that. People talk about meritocracy, but they don't actually do anything about it. And so my encouragement is let's recognize that it's an ideology that we all aspire to. But the thing is that we want meritocracy for everyone, which is better for people that have been excluded from the meritocracy. And it's better for companies that will make more money by having an environment in which more people are contributing, more people are generating more revenues, more people are going to stick around instead of leaving your company and going to your competitors.
And what groups and ethnicity and also gender and other factors have been greatly affected by the macrogenicity? I'm having trouble with that word. I'm sorry.
It's meritocracy. No, it's merit. So it's like
Meritocracy. Oh,
merit.
merit.
There's like, right, democracy and then meritocracy, right? It's kind of like the same concept, right? So what's happened, I think, and there's a lot of data that shows that when companies tout the idea that they're a meritocracy where you advance based on your merit and on your identity, unfortunately what ends up happening very often is that there is a question, which is that, well, how do you define merit? And very often, what ends up happening is that the people that are already in a leadership role will say, well, I think that this person deserves the job. Why? Well, because they went to the same school that I did. They have the same degree that I do. They follow the same path that I did. They did similar internships. And therefore, I am comfortable that they're likely to succeed because I succeeded. But when you do that, unfortunately, it tends to create a very homogeneous kind of environment so that if you come from a different background, and it could be ethnically different, but really could be a matter of where you grew up. It could be a matter of the language that you speak. It could be a matter of how you look. Maybe you like to, wear weird things, whatever, pierced nose or whatever the case might be. And people will assume that because of that, you are not likely to succeed. And so meritocracy, unfortunately, has very often been kind of an excuse to continue to promote people that you feel without a really quantitative handle on it that you feel are going to be successful in the organization. But that's where all these biases come in because, hey, we all, it's a very human thing. We get along with people that look like us, that sound like us, that share backgrounds with us. And it's a little bit counterintuitive to get outside of the comfort zone. And the meritocracy, unless you define it and measure it properly, which is what I'm suggesting that we do, the meritocracy ends up being a way of making like an old boys club where we all get along, we all like drinking together, we all like playing golf, and then pretty soon, lo and behold, you tend to have a lot of one group of people and not a lot of another group of people.
And I'm thinking about the groups as well too. That you talk about the meritocracy and whatever else. Now you talked about some of the applicants, like say you need some of this, some of that, some of that. What if the qualified applicant pool is imbalanced? Like say you don't have enough of this, you don't have enough of that, or you have too much of that. It's like what happens?
Well, so I have to say something, which is something that I diverge from a lot of people in the space of diversity, equity, and inclusion, which is that, first of all, focusing on hiring is a big mistake because, again, if you look at the numbers, you find that the biggest problem is with retention. It's once you get inside the door, what is happening to your people. Now, admittedly, you have to be mindful about tapping as much of a talent pool as possible. So if you're excluding yourself, like if you only go and recruit, let's say, from Ivy League schools, well, you think I'm getting the best students, but you're competing with some really, really, really big competitors. And so it's not necessarily, you may get somebody that maybe is a lower tier from an final Ivy League school, and you're missing out on all of the other millions of students, many of whom are actually equally talented, if not more talented than a lot of the Ivy League students, simply because you're going to that one thing. So yes, hiring to some extent is important. But what's more important is get away from this idea of focusing on, oh, I need more of this group, I need more of this group. Because ultimately, my question would be, why? And this is not a very easy thing to answer. People say, oh, you need diversity of thought so that you have greater innovation. Well, how many people in a typical company are focused on innovation, and how often do they do that? And guess what? There is research that shows that yes, if you're trying to come up with an innovative idea, a more diverse team, more diverse viewpoints, whether it's cognitive diversity, physiological diversity, whatever, gender diversity, whatever kind of diversity, it is true that that can contribute to finding better solutions. But it's also true that when you have to implement something, it's been proven over and over again that homogeneous teams work much better. And so just saying, oh, diversity is good for innovation. I'm sorry, but it's like, unless you're innovating 100% of the time and doing nothing else, but most companies don't do that. Most companies are actually concerned with implementing things. So to me, the idea that homogeneity is good, it's not so much that homogeneity is good, it's just that you have to make sure that people are all treated the same. So it's so much more important to create an environment where if it so happens that a member of the team maybe speaks with an accent or comes from a different country or has a different kind of degree than yours or happens to be racially or ethnically different or happens to be, gay or lesbian or transgender, great. You should make sure that those people can contribute their ideas just as much as anybody else, and they can contribute to the team for implementation just as much as anybody else. Because
Or have a
ultimately,
different thought, or have a different thought process as well, too.
or
It's
have
like,
different thought. Exactly.
right. Okay.
Exactly. I mean, you and I would say sort of we both identify as white men. And I suspect we're somewhat close. I'm older than you, but we're both not exactly Gen Zers, right? But I would imagine that
Or
if you and
like
I said,
baby boomers. I think baby boomers are on the verge of being discriminated. I hate to say this. So,
well, I'm actually on the tail end of the baby boomer myself, and I kind of feel like, in spite of that, I know a lot of baby boomers who are white and male and who think very differently from me. I mean, witness the fact that I'm working in diversity, equity, and inclusion, right? So, to me, the idea that we start with an identity first and try to solve problems and address concerns based on identity is a huge mistake because you're immediately creating a sense of otherness. You're saying, well, oh, you want more women? That means you have to have fewer men. You want more people of color, it means you have to have fewer white people. And that kind of mindset is very damaging. And I believe it's actually one of the reasons, not the only reason, and there's certainly some more nefarious reasons behind it, but one of the reasons for the backlash is that by focusing so much on representation, on diversity, on identity, we have inadvertently created this backlash where people get frustrated about it. And then other people can take advantage of that frustration to start to go and politicize it and turn it into a wedge to divide people, which is a terrible, terrible thing that is happening in our country right now. And we need to learn to get beyond the rhetoric and to get beyond these, people screaming about diversity and fairness and inclusion and belonging on the one hand, and meritocracy and lowering the bar and, whatever on the other hand, and realize that, look, let's all focus on what we really need. We need better companies with happier employees that are making more money.
Mhm. And plus, too, also generations could be involved as well, too. You not being baby boomers, also Gen X, Gen Y, Gen Z, millennials. We'll talk about that with Paolo Gaudiano and the book Measuring Inclusion. But first, listen to the Mike Wagner Show at the MikeWagnerShow.com, powered by SoundCloud Studios. Visit online at SoundCloudStudios.com for all your needs. Look at a professional website without breaking your budget. Sonic Web Studios is the answer. Sonic Web Studios offers fast, affordable custom web designs that blow the competition away. Call today, 1-800-303-3960. That's 1-800-303-3960. Or email to support@sonicwebstudios.com. Mention the Mike Wagner Show. Get 20% off your first project. Sonic Web Studios. Take your image to the next level. Also, time to give an official shout out to our official sponsor of the Mike Wagner Show, international warring author Mia Molson-Zia. If you love fast-paced mysteries, you'll love Missing by Mia Molson-Zia, available on Amazon, paperback, and ebook. Missing is fast-paced and intriguing with an unforgettable twist. Takes place in 4 countries, 2 strangers, 1 target, where truth is illusion and those will be the first go missing. It's available on Amazon, a paperback, and ebook. Missing by Mia Molson-Zia has got great reviews, and Eve 11 enjoys by Howard celebrities, including Joanna Cassie, Forrest Riley, and many others. So grab your copy today for it goes Missing by Mia Molson-Zia, available on Amazon. Coming soon, Missing 2, Double Expense, Double of Fun. Check it out on Amazon. Also brought to you by Sweet Psalmist by Serena Wagner, based on the life of David, including 30 exquisite pains and King David Psalms. The Sweet Psalmist gives new perspective of David through the Psalms he wrote as the time of shepherd started and complicate yet turbulent relationship with King Saul. It's a story of love, betrayal, repentance, hope, and more. Check out the Sweet Psalmist by Serena Wagner on Amazon. Keyword Sweet Psalmist Serena Wagner. Also, check out the Mike Wagner Show at the MikeWagnerShow.com, 50 podcast platforms, heard in 110 countries. Take us with you on any mobile device. Follow us on Facebook, SoundCloud, Spreaker, Spotify, iHeartRadio, also on Anchor FM, Apple Music, and more. And for great gift ideas, t-shirts, pop sockets, throw pillows, tote bags, hoodies, Amazon.com. Check out the Mike Wagner Show podcast. And for more great gift ideas, go to Amazon.com/Mia Molson-Zia. Great books, merchandise, more. And support the Mike Wagner Show on Anchor FM, PayPal, and the MikeWagnerShow.com. We're here at the multi-talented author, sought-after speaker with degrees of applied mathematics, aerospace engineering, computational neuroscience, Paolo Gaudiano here on the Mike Wagner Show. And tell us about your background with applied math, aerospace engineering, computational neuroscience, and how'd you first get inspired by that?
It's a really interesting question. And when I look back on my career, I like to joke. So I'm 63 years old now, and I started working in DEI when I was 53. And I told myself I finally figured out what I want to do when I grow up. So it took me 53 years to figure that out. And but in retrospect, when I look at what I did, I was always very interested in learning as much as I could about as many fields as I could. I was a very curious person, and as a kid, I loved working on mechanical things. I was the kind of kid that, like, at 10 years old, I would like tear apart my parents' vacuum cleaner and then put it back together just to figure out how it worked. So I always really liked that. And so I wanted to study engineering. I learned to use computers like early on when I was in high school. Actually, when I first came to the States, I was in my last year of high school. I lived with a family that was an exchange student, if you will, and we bought one of those very first Apple IIe's. Right, we're talking about in the late
Oh,
1970s, like
wow. Like those big
1978.
ones, like the Lisa, the Mac, and all that. Oh, my
Exactly,
goodness.
exactly. And so I was fascinated with stuff. And so when I started to study, I loved mathematics too, but I saw that I was interested in the applications of mathematics. And so I was able to get into a degree program in applied mathematics, which was a great excuse to learn a lot of math, but also learn a lot of engineering. So I was taking engineering courses from many different departments. And toward the end of my undergraduate, I was involved with some projects that had to do with aerospace. There was a group of students that was going to send up a project up on the space shuttle. And unfortunately, later the space shuttle blew up, so that experiment never really took off to the ground, quite literally. But we ended up being involved with that. And I also took a course on how the brain works from an engineering perspective. And I thought, oh my God, this is the most amazing thing that I've ever learned. And so I wanted to study that. And there was a professor at the time who was in aerospace engineering department that was studying what was called neural networks, which today we called AI. And so
Hmm.
he invited me, said, do you want to be my, work on me on a master's degree? So I had a master's degree in which I learned about neuroscience, I learned how the brain works, but at the same time, I learned everything about computational fluid dynamics and, whatever, orbital dynamics and all kinds of things about aerospace engineering. And I went to NASA for some projects. And so it was kind of 2 degrees for one. And then I was able to get a PhD in computational neuroscience, where I literally brought together my background in mathematics, psychology, cognitive science, physiology to understand essentially how the brain works. So it was really kind of like AI, but different because we really cared about how the brain works. All of that taught me one very important thing. And I know this sounds like a crazy connection to where I am today, but I was fascinated by how neurons in your brain, which individually are they're very noisy. They're not very accurate. If you look at 1,000 neurons in your brain, they're all different from each other. Imagine making a camera where all of the photosensors are all completely different from each other. Like, it would never work. Somehow the brain magically creates these circuits that make it possible for you to do things like see and speak and move your hands, which us Italians do a lot more. And so that's what I was studying. And what it taught me was a way of quantifying the link between an individual and the collective. So whether it's a neuron inside your retina or inside your brain, and later I applied that to people inside an organization or drivers on a highway or users on a computer network. Or a lot of the work that I did also was, for example, looking at marketing, understanding how people behave in the context of, let's say, a marketplace where they're buying and selling things. And so I spent first 10 years as a professor. I got tenure, then I got tired of being a professor. Well, I got tired of the academic lifestyle and I decided I wanted to be an entrepreneur. And then I spent about 15 years in a company where we use these computer simulations to solve really complex problems that had to do with managing people. And then I was personally interested in DI. And then in 2015, 10 years ago, I had this light bulb moment where I was sitting on a session about DI. And as I was hearing people talk about the experiences that they had and struggling to find solutions, I thought, well, maybe I can take my work and use it to quantify the impact of diversity, equity, and inclusion. I got super excited about it. I dropped everything else I was doing. I spent about a year doing my own research. I built those computer simulations, and that's how I got into it. So in a way, my background, my mathematical background really helped me to think very logically about things. My engineering background makes me appreciate building things. Then the fact that I was a teacher is one thing that I love to do is I love to do public speaking, whether it's podcast or presentations. I mean, I literally do. I've done, this is today is my 40th presentation since the beginning of
Oh
the
my
year.
goodness. Wow.
So yeah,
Congratulations.
no, and I love taking complex ideas and making them simple for people, and then that's the teacher in me. And then eventually, the diversity, equity, inclusion kind of brought together all the pieces of my background, my business experience, my entrepreneurial experience, my scientific experience, my experience understanding people, and my passion for ultimately trying to make the world a better place. Not because I believe in like again unicorns and fairies, but because so often I see people wasting their time and energy hating on each other and fighting each other instead of saying, can we find a common ground that we can all agree on so that instead of pushing in different directions, we're all pushing forward? Because I think that when you do that, you make better progress. And so, really, my entire career, all aspects of it, have really led me to do the work that I'm doing right now. And every morning when I wake up, I am just so grateful that I'm doing my work of that I'm doing because it's so meaningful to me. Now, since the middle of January, when all of these executive orders have come out, basically trying to destroy the field of DI, things have been tricky. But luckily for me, because my work is so dramatically different, because I don't talk about the controversial aspects of DI, I've actually been able to do okay. And as I mentioned, people are inviting me left, right, and center. Like I literally every week I will get 2 or 3 emails saying, "Can you come speak at this conference? Can you do a podcast? Can you teach a lecture for my students?" And so I feel very much that even though it's a difficult time, I feel that I am doing something truly amazing that has a chance to get us beyond all of this turmoil and what I hope will be a significantly brighter condition for everyone.
Mhm. I think that sounds amazing as well, too. When you talk about protons and neutrons and all that, I think of the third one, which is called morons, which some people you think of it too: protons, neurons, and morons.
You should have a t-shirt made up that says that protons, neurons, and morons. It's
It's actually all over Facebook too, and the memes and whatever else. I think that's like in what Bugs Bunny or something like that. You'll learn a lot about Bugs Bunny, I'll tell you. So
I love
he'll
Bugs
have been
Bunny.
part of it too. It's like like he's a rabbit, he's a smart ass, and he could qualify for DEI too. And speaking of that, to being president of Aleria, you have a lot of people in there. Maybe you can give some of the background, some of your key employees, like diverse backgrounds, race, gender, creed, everything like that. Maybe
You
just
know,
a few.
so here's the thing. So right now our company is actually very small. We're down to only about 3 people
Oh
because of the
wow.
fact that, well, we're a startup and so we're not that old. And really the startup we founded a few years ago, and it's been kind of an interesting. I have altogether probably about a dozen people that help with various things, but in terms of actually people that are actively involved, there is 3 of us, and I'm the only white man. There is a woman who happens to be from China. There is another woman who happens to be from Italy. We've worked with people. When I collaborate with people, I do a lot of collaborations. Right now, for example, I'm starting to write a second book that's going to be kind of a sequel that really talks about this issue of meritocracy. And my co-author is a black woman who's absolutely brilliant, and we have some of the most amazing conversations. But one of the things that I've always emphasized is that focusing on identity is the wrong thing to do. I didn't hire a woman to be my partner in my business because she's a woman. I did that because she was the best person that had the qualifications that I needed. Now, in some cases, if you are trying to sell, let's say, golf clubs to white men, then you probably want a white guy who knows how to play golf, right? Well, if you're trying to sell
Unless
diversity,
you're Tiger Woods. So
well, unless you, but right. But what I'm saying is that there's certainly a truth that you need to be mindful. You need to be able to understand the audience that you're targeting. Now, I don't buy this notion that, wow, you need to have 13% of these and 8% of those and 5% of those. I think to me, it's more important that you need to have an environment in which if I find it advantageous to hire a black person because I need to be able to understand the community better, I want to make sure that that black person is going to be able to contribute meaningfully. Because if I hire somebody and then I treat them like crap and they climb up and they don't contribute, and then I'm sitting there and I'm not learning anything and I'm wasting my money and their time. So I am much less concerned about like I get frustrated with companies like, oh, but look, we've increased this by 1.3%. And it's like, so what? You've increased it by 1.3%. And in so doing, you've pissed off half of your company who now claim that they're being discriminated against because they're white male. And that's a really stupid thing to do because if you're just
Right.
say, and you're also, and not only that, by the way, you're diminishing those people that you hire. Do you know how many times I hear complaints? Let me tell you something. So the way that we collect data, the way that we measure inclusion is that we ask people to share experiences of simply, we don't say of things that made you feel excluded. We just say, tell us about things that have interfered with your ability to be successful at work. And then we ask him to categorize it and do a certain thing. So we try to be we just want to know what happened, not how you feel about it, what happened. And the comments that we hear, the complaints about DI, but here's what happens. A lot of women, a lot of people of color, they will say things that basically say, because my company is pushing DI blindly just by focusing on targets, now people accuse me of only being here because I'm a woman, because I'm black, because I'm gay, because I have a disability. And it's a terrible, terrible thing to do. We saw it during the elections, right? People were saying that Kamala Harris was the DI candidate as an insult, as if to say the only reason you got nominated as a candidate was because you're a black woman, which is incredibly insulting. It's incredibly insulting. And unfortunately, we created inadvertently that kind of an environment, but it's an absolute shame because the reality is that we need to be able to recognize people for the contributions that they make. Being colorblind is actually a stupid idea. People are like, oh, we need to be colorblind meritocracy. You need to recognize that people come from different backgrounds from you. You need to recognize that they will have different kinds of experiences, different kinds of attitudes, different kinds of things that they can contribute. And pretending that you're blind, that everybody looks exactly the same is stupid. You should instead embrace the fact that people are bringing you diverse perspectives, whether it's because of the race or simply because they grew up in a different place from you. And so I always tell people, please, 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 don't lead with identity. Do not lead with questions of, oh, do you have enough of these? Do you have enough of those? Well, do you have enough queer black women who were raised in the United States from with parents from the Caribbean who actually emigrated from, it's like it's a rabbit hole that you simply cannot get
Right.
out of.
Yeah.
And so let's
Yeah.
avoid
It,
it.
it, it just gets really nitpicky. That's the thing, too. Just really nitpicky. It's almost like really impossible. It's like asking what, 50 or 100 senators what they want in their pizza. You can't do it.
You can't do it. And this is, by the way, this is another thing that I find very interesting about people in the diversity space. And I think I understand why we do that, right? But you get these two things that people say that they want. One, I want to be able to bring my whole self to work. I want to be able to be my genuine, true me. I want to be able to be me and being recognized for me as a unique individual. At the same time, we say, I want the company to recognize that people like me are disadvantaged. They're discriminated against. They have problems. Now, here's the problem, okay? Those are both valuable aspirations, but when you put them together, they contradict one another. Because if you truly want to understand your experience, then it needs to be just you, because you may identify as a white male cisgender heterosexual person, but that does not mean that you're exactly the same as every other white male cisgender heterosexual person. The same thing with every identity. So where do you draw the line? How big should the buckets be? Should we look at the experiences of all black people? Well, but what about black people that did not come from the United States? What about somebody who grew up in Nigeria to a very wealthy family, got a degree from a top school in the UK, and then came to work in the United States? Is that the same thing as somebody who grew up in the deep South from people that were children of or grandchildren of sharecroppers who was the first person to ever go to college? They're both black, right? So
Mm-hmm.
so we need to, again, focusing on diversity first is a huge mistake. And I know why people do it. I believe that they do it because back in the 1960s, we had the convergence of two things. We had civil rights movements, but we also have women gaining more rights. And all of a sudden, you had more women, more people of color. Then there was the ADA, so there were people with disabilities. There were all of these laws that made it more likely for people who were not white men to make it into the workforce. They joined companies and they're not treated well. They're treated like crap. They don't get invited to meetings. They get, oh, it's like we forgot. Oh, we're going out drinking with the buddies and we don't feel comfortable having you around because you're a woman with children or whatever, or because you're black and, whatever the case might be. So these people realized that they were not welcome in the workplace. But the problem is that how do you measure that? Well, the only thing they could measure was diversity because diversity is easy. You go in a room and you count how many of these, how many of those, how many of those. And so diversity became the torch that was carried because it was the only thing that people knew how to measure. And still today, with the exception of my book, I believe that most people, all they measure is diversity. The only exception is that now people measure feelings of inclusion, which to me is useless because knowing that you feel excluded is like going to the doctor and the doctor asking you, how healthy do you feel today? Oh, on a scale of 1 to 10, you feel 5. Okay, take 2 aspirin and call me in the morning. It's not enough to know that people feel excluded, that they feel that they don't belong. You need to know what is happening to you that is, and then you need to see, are things happening to you that are not happening to other people? Can I
Mhm.
fix that? If you're being excluded from meetings, can I create a policy that every manager has to keep track of everybody who's invited to meetings and they have to immediately notify anybody who was excluded inadvertently and let them know what happened in the meeting, right? So instead of focusing on diversity, let's focus on inclusion. And by inclusion, I mean companies that make it possible for everyone to have the same kinds of experiences and to contribute meaningfully to the company, regardless of what they look like.
Mhm.
And when you start to think of it that way, I think it just makes it a lot easier for everyone. You know, you would avoid all these conflicts and controversies.
And how about the generational thing we were going to cover as well too before we took a time out? You know, baby boomers, Gen X, Gen Y, Gen Z, millennials. Now you got the was it the alpha generation. Then you got upcoming betas. It's like how do you manage the generational thing involving DEI?
Yeah. It's the same thing. You know, we're creating labels, we're slapping labels on people, and we're assuming that because you are Gen Z, this is how you behave, this is your attitude. I know a lot of Gen Zs. You know, I have two kids who are millennials and I have two stepchildren who are not Gen Zs, whatever the next one is. But it's like
Yeah, I
they
think
are they're
that's
all
the alpha one,
different.
isn't it? Alpha's like what?
No, honestly, I apologize. I forget. After like millennial, maybe Gen Z. But anyway,
Yeah,
but the
that's it.
point being, again, the rather than focusing on the fact that, oh, you're a Gen Z, how do I talk to you? You should be the kind of person that says, I recognize that you bring something into the workplace that is different from what I bring into the workplace. I will respect that. Now, if you suck and you don't show up for work and you have a terrible attitude and you assume that you're entitled to everything and you don't feel like you need to work more than 4 hours a day, I'm going to fire your ass. Not because you're Gen Z, because you're not contributing to my company.
And
And
it
and
doesn't
I know
so it
I
doesn't
know
matter generation, race, or anything. It's just
no,
what you
no.
bring,
So it's
right?
really more about be prepared, learn how to measure as a company, measure when there may be some things that are not working properly because they're causing problems for some groups of people. And as an individual, just learn to be a bit more open-minded. But more importantly, I think that ultimately we cannot put the burden on individuals. Like people that are like, oh, we need to do one. If only people were not racist and prejudiced. If only everybody knew how to treat everybody else. If only everybody, it's like, look, you cannot blame individuals. We are biased. I go to a party, I find somebody Italian, I start speaking Italian to them. I like them because we share a lot of things in common, right? We share a lot of things. We have a lot of things in common. But the point is that as an individual, if you give me guidelines as a company, you create policies that say, okay, here's how you organize meetings. Here's how you make sure that you're assigning projects fairly. Because if I like the Italian guy or the Italian woman when I'm talking to them at lunch and we sit in a corner speaking Italian, that's okay. But if when the time comes to assign clients, I give that person the best clients because I like them, that's the problem. Because all of a
Ah,
sudden, all the Italians in my company are getting all the best projects. And then guess what? When performance review comes around, oh, yeah, they're great. Look, they got all these great clients. They sold more stuff. And it's not because they're better, it's because they're Italian. That would be wrong. And this is the mistake that we're making. And so the best way to do that is not to say, stop liking Italians. That's bullshit. You can't do that. I like Italians and I'm always going to like Italians, right? And it's the same thing whether it's political, religious. Of course, if you happen to be a very spiritual person, you're going to be more likely to have a meaningful conversation with somebody who's also a spiritual person. If you're an atheist, you're going to be more comfortable speaking with another atheist. That's not the problem. Don't fix that. Don't try to break those unconscious biases. Create policies, processes, and systems that minimize the negative impact on people that may result from those biases. Your meeting schedule should be very structured. Your performance evaluation should be structured. Who gets mentoring should be structured. Who gets promoted? How much people get paid? All of that should be structured in a very clear way that strips out subjective ideals. And when you do that as a company, you will have created a meritocracy. You will have created an environment in which people are promoted, advanced, compensated because of the work that they do, not because of what they look like. And doesn't that sound appealing and easy instead of, oh, you're a bad person because when you see black people, you get scared and you think that they might be criminals. That kind of stuff is decades of being bombarded by the media, by entertainment industry
and,
that
and
taught us
today's
that,
social media too. So I've
and
noticed that
social
social media is
media
just
and social
really
media
hammering it. Oh my God.
those kinds of built-in reactions are unavoidable. But what you can do, you can learn to recognize them, and you can also be given guidelines that say, here's what you need to do in the context of a corporation. This is what we expect of you. This is how you should behave. These are the policies that you should follow. And if you can do that, life is going to be a lot easier. You're not going to be say, it's not about, oh, now you need to go hire a person like this because we don't have enough of them. Yeah, because well, maybe you go hire a person like that and then they're not qualified, and then it makes everybody else look terrible. And it makes you frustrated because now you hired somebody in your team that is incapable. When people talk about, I don't want to lower the bar, amen to that. But show me the bar. Show me that you've created a bar that is measurable, and show me that you've actually tracked the effectiveness of your bar in choosing candidates. If you can't do that, then shut the hell up because you're just making up discriminatory ideas of where you think is the bar. And so
Mhm.
every time I hear these kinds of arguments, meritocracy, lowering the bar, hiring the best, put numbers behind it. That's what I did with my first book, with Measuring Inclusion. And my second book that I'm working on, which talks about this idea of the intersection of meritocracy and inclusion and basically builds on. So this was really about measuring something that we've never measured before, which is the experiences of people in the workplace and how that impacts the finances of the organization. The next book really looks at the next level up, which is that how do you then create an environment where you can, by measuring the right things, you can actually ensure that your processes are maximizing the probability of success of all your employees, not just
Mm.
the ones that are privileged,
And I
right?
think that'd be great for bonus time and everything else is what we need. And more in the book, Measure Inclusion with Paolo Gaudiano in a minute. You're listening to the Mike Wagner Show at the MikeWagnerShow.com, powered by SoundCloud Studios, brought to you by official sponsor of the Mike Wagner Show, international warring author Mia Molson's Missing, the Sweet Psalms by Serena Wagner, based on life of Dave, including 30 Quiz of Pains and King David Psalms, Amazon.com, keyword Sweet Psalms Serena Wagner. We'll be back with the multi-talented Paolo Gaudiano of Measure Inclusion after this timeout. We're back with Paolo Gaudiano of Measure Inclusion here on the Mike Wagner Show. And Paolo, you just really broke down DEI in a great, sensual way. And any final thoughts or what can people learn from this?
The only thing that I would say is that unfortunately, there are economic and political forces that benefit from creating division in our country, that benefit from creating hatred between groups of people, because it makes it easy to polarize people and then pull them into your camp and get their votes, get their money, get their support for your laws and things of that sort. That division is harmful. That division is not healthy. It's very easy to fall into that. So my appeal to people is let's recognize that with very, very few exceptions, with the very, very, very most extreme people, a lot of people in the middle are reasonable, and we all want the same thing. We all want to be able to get jobs that we're qualified for, regardless of what we look like. We want to be able to get promoted based on the work that we did, not based on our identity. So my appeal to people is if you're tempted to say, oh, that DI is BS and it's horrible and it's reverse discrimination, just ask yourself, is that really true, or is that just what you hear from the bubble that you're in? And likewise, in DEI, the word meritocracy has been a very bad word. Like people in DI think that meritocracy is basically a dog whistle for, racism and discrimination and prejudice and homogeneous companies and white supremacy and all this stuff. And I would ask the people in DI, stop that. Start realizing that the people that you think, the views that you hear from the other side are very, very extreme views that are not representative of what most people want. And I really firmly believe that if we just like let go of the hatred and recognize that there are these politicized, polarized arguments that are really flawed and come back to what we truly all want, I believe it will be a much better society. And I believe that it will make companies that make a lot more money and
Mm-hmm.
and employees that would be a lot happier, which is why the title of my book, it's higher profits and happier people. That's what I want. That's what I want for my clients. That's what I want for my friends. That's what I want for people in my family. And I hope that a lot of your listeners will appreciate that as well.
And certainly as well, too, you're really putting a nutshell, Paolo. Where can we find your book, Measuring Inclusion at?
So pretty much any bookseller, if you go, by the way, right now, if you go to Amazon.com and you look up Measuring Inclusion, it's the only book with that title. My publisher, we actually have won now 3 awards with this book. And to
Nice,
celebrate that, my publisher has dropped the price on the Kindle version to only 99 cents. And one thing that
nice.
I would like to encourage people to do is, okay, great, I can buy a book for 99 cents. But here's another thing you can do with Amazon. You can buy multiple copies and you get individual redemption codes that never expire. So if you spend 20 bucks and you buy 20 copies of my book, you can give 19 of them away to your colleagues, your friends, make it a Christmas gift because these things never expire. And so I would highly encourage listeners, take advantage of this amazing opportunity, buy multiple copies of my Kindle book, give it away to people, or buy one, read it, and if you like it, then go back and buy a bunch more. The sale is going to go on through the summer. But I'm really hoping to get the word out. I get whatever, I might make 20 cents every time somebody buys a Kindle book. I'm not going to get rich, even if I sell 10,000 copies. That'll be what, 2,000, 10, whatever, $200, right? I mean, it's so $2,000.
Better
I'm
than
not going to get rich from
Spotify.
that. Yeah, maybe, but still, but the point being, I really hope that people go out and read the book and help me to get the word out because I think it's a very, very dark time right now, and I think that we can make things much better.
And that's a great idea what you're doing, Paolo. And what's your website?
My website is aleria.tech, and that's spelled Aleria.tech. We acknowledge the fact that we are a technology company that's focused on DI, but at heart, we have software, we have, the platform, we have a dashboard and all these other things. So Aleria.tech is my company. And then, of course, you can find me on LinkedIn. There are not a lot of Paolo Gaudianos on LinkedIn. I'm pretty much the only one. But I would say Aleria.tech and then Amazon for the book Measuring Inclusion.
We'll certainly check that out. We're here, the amazing, multi-talented Paolo Gaudiano of Measuring Inclusion here on Mike Wagner Show. Just a few more things besides your upcoming book. What else are we expecting 2025 and beyond, even going into 2026?
Two things. One of them is with my very dear friend and colleague, Cynthia Overton. We are now starting to write a second book, which is going to be talking about this idea of the intersection between meritocracy and inclusion. And we take head on this idea that, look, ultimately, meritocracy, if it's done properly, it's actually a very good idea, but it needs to be done in a way that it's quantified and measurable. And we build on the work from the first book to show how you can expand it to turn a company to true meritocracy. So I would ask people to do that. And then the second thing that I would suggest is you mentioned at the opening, I organize a conference, which we used to call it the Diversity and Inclusion Research Conference, or DIRC. We started in 2018. It's been running for 8 years straight. This year, in recognition of the fact that literally we've had professors and speakers that have said, I cannot come to your conference because it has the word diversity in it. So this year, we're calling it simply DIRC without saying what it stands for. We're calling it DIRC 25, Merit plus Inclusion. And a lot of the conversation will be about that. If you go to the website DIRC, spelled DIRC.info, you will find information about the conference. It's a virtual event on October 30th of this year. It's only a half day packed with the great information. Anyone who's interested, we bring in corporate, academic, government, philanthropy, students. It's a very, very mixed audience. And the goal is let's talk about how research can help to create organizations that are more inclusive, that are more of a meritocracy, and how the collaborations between academia, corporate, etc., can lead to finding solutions for these very vexing problems that we face.
And that's certainly amazing as well, too. We love what you got. Who do you consider biggest influence in your career?
If I had to drop off, let's say off the top of my head, possibly the biggest one was this author whose name is Ijeoma Oluo. She's written a couple of books. The first book that she wrote was called So You Want to Talk About Race? And then she wrote a second book called Mediocre. And they're kind of a punch in the gut. She's a black woman. She's an amazing, amazing writer. And she writes these books in which she basically points out some of the problems as from the point of view of a black person. But the way that she does it is so analytical and so powerful. So those really influenced me profoundly when I first got into the space. And there have been a number of other people. Ellen Powell is another person who's written some books that have been great. This woman, Mida Malik. I mean, and it's interesting because it's really funny, but I actually find that most of the people that I truly respect and appreciate tend to be women. Not all of them. They're actually, let's see, there is a guy, Randall Pinkett, who's written a book about also it's along the idea of using data for diversity, equity, and inclusion. Lily Zhang is actually a very, very well-known DEI proponent who has written a couple of books. Their books are actually really, really well received because they combine sort of the motivational side and the pragmatic side. But so phenomenal people that have done excellent work before me. I would say Ijeoma Oluwa was kind of the first one that really sort of opened my eyes in a way that hadn't been done before.
That is fantastic. It's amazing. What's the best advice you can give to anybody at this point?
Stop listening to the media and actually, do some reading and try to avoid the negative. Whenever you hear somebody saying something negative and critical about somebody else, just shut it down, turn it off, and try to find something positive to say about people.
And I think that's a great idea as well, too. We all need that. We're here with the multi-talented author of the book, Measure Inclusion, Paolo Gaudiano, here on the Mike Wagner Show. Paolo, very big thank you for your time. You've been absolutely amazing. Learned a lot. Looking forward to having you soon. Keep us up to date. Keep in touch. Love to have you back. And what's your website? How do people contact you? Where can people purchase or check out your book?
Thank you so much, Mike. It's been a real pleasure. You've asked some phenomenal questions, and I'm delighted to have had the pleasure of being on your podcast. Thank you.
And your website again?
It's aleria.tech, aleria.tech, and then dirc.info for the conference, and then measuring inclusion on Amazon or any bookseller.
We will certainly check that out. Once again, Paolo, very big thank you for your time. You've been absolutely fantastic. Looking forward to having you soon. Keep us up to date. Keep in touch. Love having you back. We wish our best. And Paolo, you definitely have a great future ahead of you.
Thank you so much.